So we're here today just to, at least as an initial session, to find out some information about very interesting aspects of Larry Tillemans' life and his work as a clerk typist at the Nuremberg war crimes, and maybe something about how you grew up and how you were raised and the like, just so we can have a little bit of context. Does that sound okay?
Sure.
So I'll just ask you some questions and let's make this very conversational.
Okay.
And thank you for your time and thank you for your service to our country and everything you do educationally to teach people about what you saw and what you did, okay?
Thank you.
And why don't you give us your name, your full name?
Well, Lawrence P. L-A-W-R-E-N-C-E. And it's Tillemans. My dad came from Holland. T-I-L-L-E-M-A-N-S.
And where were you born?
In a little town of Minneota, Minnesota. It's in the southwest corner. Marshall would be the closest that you might know of. It's Townline County. And I was born in 1926.
What's your birthday?
Oh, that's August 1st.
August 1st. Well, you got a birthday coming up.
Not too long.
It makes me think of southwest Minnesota has a lot of Dutch people from
Yeah.
You know.
Belgians and Dutch were the main ones at Minneota. And at Ghent, of course, was Belgian. That's about 5 miles from Minneota.
How big was the town when you were born? How many people in Minneota?
I can officially tell you it was 918 back in 1926, and I think it's increased maybe about 500 since.
Well, that's pretty good that the population has increased.
And decreased anyway.
What were your parents' names?
William Tillemans, and then he was Dutch, and he married an Irish girl named Catherine Welsh, and the kids often said, well, the Irish and the Dutch, they don't amount to much.
What did your parents do for a living?
My dad was a hog buyer.
Okay.
Minneota area there was raised a lot of hogs, and he bought hogs all his life while he was a grown-up boy, until one of my older brothers came back from the Army, 45, and he's been buying hogs there until he died about 3 years ago.
So the hog buying business was a family business for a long time.
Pretty much. Yeah, I worked there too, and my oldest brother Phil was the trucker, and he hauled the hogs. First it was all railroad back then, but now, after the war, it went all trucks.
And how many children in your family?
In our mind, there would be, there were 9 in all. 5 were born in Holland and 4 here in the United States when my dad and mother came here.
Okay. And you were born in this country? I
was.
Okay. And you were telling me you had a number of brothers who were Eagle Scouts?
Yeah, they was rather unique, and I attained Eagle back in 1940 or 41, and have you ever heard of Boy's Life magazine?
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Well, they featured the 4 of us, and my dad and the Scoutmaster is 4 in the family, all with Eagle badges on here.
You still have the article?
Yeah.
Maybe after we get done, let's put it on the tape. That'd be fun to have, okay?
Yeah, and the original is there, but it's all faded, but I made some different ones, so you know.
Terrific.
Yeah.
And how were you educated? Did you go to school?
Yeah, grade school and public school. The last 2 years, I went to Catholic parochial school, was just built then, and that would have been then 4 years back in public school.
Where did you graduate high school from?
Minneota in 1944.
Okay, Minneota in 1944. Very good. So when World War II broke out, you were December 7, 1941, what, 14 years old then?
That's all, yeah, maybe 15.
Sure. What's your recollections of Pearl Harbor Day in December 7, 41?
Well, my recollection was that I was shooting baskets with the basketball on the barn. And it was on Sunday afternoon it was announced of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And of course that changed everything once that happened. A lot of history about it.
What was sort of your reaction when you heard that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor?
Well, I knew that my oldest brother already, the inductions had started as far as the draft, and he was called with an early number, so he was in the military at the time, or no, shortly after, thereabouts. And then I had another brother both of them served in the Southwest Pacific. I might tell this about the little town. We lived on the corner of a street, and there were 3 of us in the military. Next to us was Anderson. They had 2, that's 5. Guyowitz was the next house, had 4.
All in the military.
All in the military, and Starts, these are all in a row, and Starts had 2. So there were 11 of us in the military.
All within a small
5-year period.
Wow. Did everybody come home from the war?
No. Wendell died in a bombing run over Berlin, and Melvin lost both legs, and another one was brain dead. All of that.
How many people do you think served from Minnesota during the Second World War?
Well, I don't know, but it was high. I thought that 15 out of our graduating class of boys was high, went in the military, but I made an inquiry into that, and that was average. That's 75% of the graduating boys in that period of time served in the military. So you tell that to the young kids today that are graduating, you're lucky if you got 2 or 3 or 4%, but that's, I thought that was high, but that was average, 75%. 75% of the boys, did I say 25? 71, they corrected, 75%. And the other 25, if you were farming and it was essential on the farm, that was exempt from the draft. And then the rest would be if you weren't physically able.
Sure. What were some of the things you liked to do when you grew up? What were your hobbies? Obviously, Eagle Scouts, so you spent a lot of time scouting.
Yeah, scouting was, we had a real good scoutmaster, very devoted. I don't know how long he was the scoutmaster there, must have been 20, 30 years. And that scouting was part of athletics was another thing, baseball and basketball. We had a good basketball team, but back then, if you turned 18 before January, you were subject to the draft. So our star center, we had a good winning record, our star center, and one of the forwards that was started, Dick Lund and Jim Sumption, they both enlisted in the Navy because you could go in the Navy at 17.
Okay.
And they didn't want to take their chance on the Army. So then we started losing the game.
You lost your best players to the service.
Yeah. Yeah, you didn't stay very long until you went in there. That 75% of the graduating boys was all the way through 42, 3, and 4 at least, maybe some of 45 years.
Those are some amazing numbers, though. 75.
16 million were served in the military.
About 300,000 killed in the Second World War.
Yeah.
I was just looking up something because they had Edgerton. What was I trying to think of?
Oh,
Edgerton. They were the state basketball tournament champion, the Flying Dutchman from 1960.
Yeah.
Because a lot of
Were
good
you
basketball.
from that area?
No, but I know that Southwest Minnesota has had a lot of good basketball teams.
Yeah,
over the
Edgerton
years.
had a good team. That's when all high schools participated in the same
One class tournament.
Yeah.
Those were the days. That was the event of all events, was the high school basketball tournament.
And then the little town of Lind came in there.
During the war, I think Lind won.
Yeah,
maybe before the war.
well, yeah, because we played Lind, and I think they had a high school population under 100 for 4 classes.
And went to the state basketball team.
Yeah, got second place.
Fabulous story. When you grow up, did you pay much attention to what was happening in Europe? So if it's 1938, 1939, did it make much of an impression on you?
I don't know as I did. We were concerned, mother was, dad was, 2 brothers, but they were both in the Southwest Pacific. Bernard was in the 41st all-out action, 41st Division. Francis, he was went to college and was an electrical engineer, and he went into the Signal Corps. And he was on an island not far off from New Guinea, and he would hitchhike rides to where Bernard's division was. So they got together 3 or 4 times.
So your brothers saw each other during the war?
Yeah.
Did they write letters home?
Yeah, that was the email. You had a little bit of a letter that was photographed, and then that went through. You had to save on the space and time. And yeah, they were good about writing, except Bernard was a little slow, but there were a lot of times he couldn't do anything about it. Even was either they were fighting or he was in an area that didn't get the mail out.
Did the family save the letters? Do you have the letters?
Oh, excuse me, I'm sure that my mother saved a lot of them, yeah.
Would you read the letters then when they came?
Yeah?
Okay. What kind of impression did that make? So here your
Well,
brothers
they
and
couldn't
sisters-
tell much about what
Yeah.
they were doing,
Yeah.
but they missed home. Yeah, they missed home.
What did you gather what they were doing based on what they could tell you?
Well, I knew that Bernard was in action
Okay.
more than Francis was. One time they were together in the foxholes when the Japanese attacked in Biak Island, and so they both had their share of fighting at that time together.
That's something that it's probably not too often that two brothers were fighting next to each other.
No, I should say that, no.
Would your parents, because they were from Holland, talk about what was happening in Europe? Ever?
Well, not my mother was from
Right, but
Irish,
your dad-
but my dad wouldn't talk much about it.
Okay.
After the war, I was in Europe and got to see some of my relatives over in Holland in 45, 46.
What were their attitudes towards Germans, I wonder?
Pardon?
Did they have any attitude since they had been under occupation of the Germans?
Yeah, yeah.
What did they think about the Germans?
Well, I don't call it dislike, maybe hate.
Okay. So
Yeah.
they had to survive the war under German
Yeah, they
occupation.
had rough going there. The Germans took over Holland pretty fast. Belgium too.
When you were growing up in Minnesota, did you know any Jewish people?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't know any that were of Jewish. In the army, I did.
Okay, was that the first time you met anybody that was Jewish
Yeah.
when you were in the army?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was in Third Army, and that the reason I got into Third Army, a little story behind that, I suppose. But my brother Francis was in the Signal Corps, and he said, if you can try it, stay in the Signal Corps and stay out of the infantry. So I was at a typing class. He told me took typing. Remember, my mother said, Lawrence, you should take typing. All the boys took typing. Your sister did too. Oh, Mom, I said, that's girls' work. I don't want to be a typist. That's clerk. Well, you'll never be sorry if you took typing. Well, anyway, then that was my junior year or sophomore year. And fall came, and the typing class had 15 typewriters. They were all the manuals, you know, run, you ring them in, go back again. And out of those available typewriters that there were 14 girls and one boy.
It was you.
How did you guess that?
So you learned to type.
I learned to type, and I'm not very good though. And I put down on my MOS what you got to put down when you go into the Army. What were you qualified to do, or what did you do? Well, you just turned 18. There wasn't much you did do. Got out of high school, and I put down expert typewriter clerk, 42 words a minute. Well, expert would sure be close to 70, you know. But I didn't figure the Army knew all that, so I just put, I didn't lie, I said I was expert, but not qualified, was 42 words a minute, so I got put into the Signal Corps, and that's where I served, and that's how because I was a typist, there weren't very many guys did typing, and then when I went into the Army, when I got overseas, that was what I went right into Third Army typing. All a battalion that had typewriters.
To take a step back for a moment, so you went into the Army in 1944 after you graduated high school?
Yeah, right after.
Okay. Where were you inducted?
Well, that would be Fort Snelling.
Oh, so you went through Fort Snelling.
Yeah.
Okay. You remember what it was like to leave home and go to the Army?
Well, I wanted to go.
Okay.
I wanted to serve. Everybody would. The day after Pearl Harbor, I don't know if you're aware of this, but over 1 million young boys volunteered to go in the Army. And I wonder how many of them would do that today.
That is an amazing number. So December 8th, because that would have been Monday, December 8th. So
Yeah.
a million people.
Right, that was Sunday, next day was Monday, and they volunteered. I got a picture of that too.
Yeah, well, that'd be great to take a look at it. So you went up to Fort Snelling, and where did you do your training then? Your basic training?
That was at Camp Fannin, Texas.
Okay.
They had 18 weeks, that was primarily infantry training,
Okay.
and near Dallas. And then went overseas. I wasn't in any battles. If I have any claim to fame, it's going to be that I got to see the Nuremberg and Dachau trials.
Well, that's certainly important. When you went overseas, did you go to England first? Is that where you went?
No, we landed in Le Havre, France.
Oh, okay.
And then went over to Bad Tolz was where the Third Army was headquartered out of, and that's the army that I went into, real near Dachau.
When would you have landed in Le Havre? So when did you reach France?
I think it was, I started serving the duty in March of '46.
Okay, so you were there after the war. Okay.
Yeah, okay. And there would have been about, the trials ended in November, so I had about 8 or 9 months where I was able to do data at both Nuremberg and Dachau, because Third Army wanted their own data, and there was about 1,000 military serving duty, but that was the duty that went right to Nuremberg. And so I had opportunity to visit both by doing duty at Third Army.
So how did you get from, let's take a step back. Tell me a little bit about the process by which, did one day an officer walk in and say, you're going to be doing this in connection with the war crimes trials, or how did that work?
There were 3 of us that went at the same time. We came overseas together, Norbert, Norman, and Larry. And we had an orientation meeting, as I remember. And we first went to Bad Tolz. Sergeant Stedham did the orientation to let us know what our duties were going to be. And there were about 20 or 30 Frauleins that were typists that were all sitting behind because they had to hear more of the data. I kind of made a joke out of it. I turned around there. Here was this good-looking one. She waved at me and he winked like that. Oh, I said, hey, Norm, that one that's blonde and then I think she likes me. Well, how do you know? Well, she's winking. He turned back. She didn't wink at me. Well, she winked at me. We were arguing, and the colonel overheard that. The colonel that was going to give the orientation behind the Sergeant Stedham. And when he got up to talk, he said, now, gentlemen, there'll be no fraternizing with the Frauleins. 9. And you know what that means? And then I was green as could be, and I raised my hand. Yes, private. I stood up, he was about 6'6". I looked up at him and I said, well, how do they enforce that, and how do they determine if you're fraternizing or not? And he looked right down at me and he said, well, for smart Alex like you, it would probably be 30 days in the... There it goes again. I get that every once in a while, cut it off. That
30 days in the break?
That. And then I get pauses where I can't remember.
That's okay.
So I'll have to let you know that.
Well,
And then I can look over at that chart that I had, and usually it'll tell you. But that wouldn't have been one. It was, I've even forgot the question now.
we were talking about how it was that you were trained for your
Fraulein.
duties.
And you had fraternizing, and what would happen.
No fraternization with the German girls.
Yeah, so I immediately sat right down. I didn't want to argue that point from the colonel. Yeah.
So, what did they tell you that you were going to be doing? You were going to be taking...
Well, Norbert, who was from Loose Creek, Missouri, spoke fluent German.
Okay.
And they made an interpreter out of him.
Okay.
And Norman and I were the typists that we went in where we were shuffling papers more than we were typing. There was quite a few of us in that.
And you were part of what, the team that was gathering evidence or putting together?
Yeah, we were typing affidavits.
Okay.
A lot of it. 200,000 affidavits. And there were 360 witnesses. And those affidavits came from a lot of the Jewish prisoners that were in various different concentration camps. And they wrote about the treatment that they were given, or how much they suffered, and they did, the horrors of the camps. And then if you were sick, you never got treated. And I recall the first 400, I know, that went out from Dachau that were to go back to their homes. They weighed 104 pounds. That was the weight of those soldiers. And but there was no home to go to. You know, everything got bombed out. And they were so happy because they were going someplace, you know, going home. Well, in a lot of cases, if they were Jews, their parents were already in a concentration camp, and others could have been bombed, and there wasn't, so they came back, a lot of them. And they didn't know where to go, and that was another problem the Army had, because where are you going to house those guys, serve them, and what do you do with them? So it was a mess for about a year there.
And your job was to take down their stories as they were.
Yeah.
And they would tell
They
you the
were
stories.
already
and you
written.
Oh, they're already written. They wrote them
And
out.
somebody had to, what do I want to call it? It was German,
Translate them?
Russian, it could have been French, it
Yeah.
could have, and the Jewish. So they were different ones would hand you that piece of paper that they wanted to have for evidence, and then you typed it in English.
I see. Okay. And then what would you do with the documents? Give them to?
Well, they'd already probably been processed into the court hearings.
Okay.
Some had. So those were the years there weren't very many of us had electrical typewriters. And you had 4 of those carbon copies, the skins in between, you know. And then if you made a mistake, you had to stop. The Army didn't want any. Then you had to erase this one, then you erased the next one, erase the next. Well, then you had 4 of them or 5 to erase, so you can imagine how slow some of us were interpreting that. Yeah.
And where did you work? Did you have a big room, or where did you?
Yeah, it varied. I got some pictures of some of the bombed out places that we were in, especially out of Munich. These affidavits were divided quite a bit amongst different battalions that had typists.
Okay.
And there might be 20 or 30 in one group that did the typed affidavits, and but Norman and Norbert and I were always together, and some of the time we got together, getting mixed up Norbert and Norman, but Norman would come occasionally to some of the hearings, and we didn't have the typewriters down front at all. And then they were talking in German, and I'd always ask him, now, Norm, what did they say? What did they say? And he could tell me what they were saying and talking about. But some of them had a terrible story to tell.